into history. ASMR.
Thank you for your support of my channel, Sleep in a History ASMR. I appreciate you watching my short videos and my long form ones, which on the long form so far we have discussed the Spanish conquistadors. I have attempted to make a number of technical improvements to my video this week. I hope you will find my work better and hopefully more enjoyable to watch. Now with that, let's talk about our next steps. I considered many options for our next video. So far, my videos have discussed the exploration and colonization of North America from a Eurocentric perspective. But what I would like to do at this point is reach back even farther and talk about the original exploration and colonization of America. So you might be thinking Vikings and Leif Erikson. Maybe you've heard about other possible theories, such as theories about the Phoenicians and even Polynesians getting to the Americas first. But I'm actually talking about even farther back than that. Likely 10,000 to 20,000 years, even earlier than that. So the original explorers and colonizers of the New World were none other than Native Americans. Yes, that's right, they were the first. It was most certainly not done on frigates or even Viking longboats. It was done on foot, and likely done completely on foot, and not exactly with the purpose of seeking treasure or even new places to live. They were simply following herds of wild game across the Bering Strait. So I want to take some time to trace this journey and migration over a period of thousands of years. So there is nothing in the form of letters or Viking sagas that can truly trace this journey, but this is where archaeology and paleontology come in, and there is certainly plenty of evidence with which this route can be traced. And I will do so by leaning on science and taking you through this journey based on archaeological evidence. So relax and listen to the true story of the first colonizers of the New World. And I'm going to point out right over here in this part of Siberia. It's a Yana River Valley is the name of the river, and it's located in this part of Siberia here. So in 2001, hundreds of animal bones were found. They were actually found up in this area, which is located north of the Arctic Circle. Also, there were ivory pieces that were indicative of human culture, where mammoths had been hunted in this area. The finding proved that people could survive extreme conditions far north during this same time frame. It also proved that there was a sustained settlement there. And since it's not far from the Bering Strait, which is over here, it's thought to be a precursor for humans that would eventually migrate east across Beringia. So as for Beringia, I must mention that it is thought that the area between the Siberian landmass over here that's west of the modern-day Bering Sea and the land that's east of that sea, which is over here near a town called Wales, Alaska, these were actually connected. And you can kind of see the way this tan area is sort of outlined. So essentially all of this was land through here. Some of it was like frozen tundra, but a lot of it was where water had actually receded. So we were actually dealing with land that mammoths could cross and land that humans could follow mammoths across that same area. So just keep all that in mind. And now we're going to move into modern day Alaska. And I'm going to point to archaeological discoveries that show this migration across Beringia. So there's an area over here which is close, and you don't actually see the river on the map. They don't have it identified, but it's called the Tanana River, and in that river valley, which isn't far from modern-day Fairbanks, Alaska, which is about right here, 2 skeletons of ancient infants were found. They were nicknamed Sunrise Child Girl and Dawn Twilight Child Girl. Of course, they allowed the natives to give them the nickname. They have the genetic makeup of some ancient Beringians. And interestingly enough, if you go and you examine that DNA, and you examine the DNA of modern day natives, which includes your channel host, who also has a native ancestor, Sunrise Child and Dawn Twilight Child have very, very similar DNA to modern day Native Americans. So again, you're seeing we've got some evidence, some scientific evidence that not only show this migration, but also through DNA analysis show how these 2 infants that were found are related to modern day natives. So Sunrise Child and Dawn Twilight Child were likely cousins. One died premature and the other died between 1 to 3 months old. Also in the same area, not too far from Fairbanks, Alaska, also, they found tools that are similar to those tools that were found on this side of the Bering Strait in the Kamchatka Peninsula. So there again, we're seeing that these 2 areas were definitely connected. So also over here in Swan Point, which is east of Fairbanks, they found microblades. And then once again, microblades that had been found on the eastern side over here of the Bering Sea. They found similar microblades. So then again, we're seeing yet another piece of evidence. So over here into the Yukon Territory, which is in modern day Canada, there's a little cave. It's right not far from the Canadian Alaska border. In Bluefish Cave, they found these mammoth bone fragments, and that actually was interesting because that indicated an eastern reach of this migration, and they believe that these were dated as early as 20,000 years ago. So you kind of see we have this migration east from northeast Russia over into Alaska. And next I'm going to go into the mainland US, because we're going to see some really, really interesting pieces of migration that point to migration further south and further east from Alaska. So now we're going to go with the big map and just a summary as to where we've gone so far. So I'm pointing way up here. It's almost off the screen, but we've gone from this part of Siberia across Beringia, and now we're into Alaska. And this was where we last left off on the last map. So now we're going north of modern day Vancouver in this area right here. This finding was actually found in the last 5 years, and it kind of fell off the radar a little bit compared to some of the bigger news of the day, but this was a really big finding, and they believe that this was from 14,000 years ago. So we're going around the same time frame, a little later. So this little island called Triquet Island. They discovered a settlement, and plenty of evidence from the settlement have actually been recovered, including a hand drill for lighting fires, a wooden projectile device that's used for launching hunting projectiles, and also stone tools. So the most interesting thing about this is the existence of a civilization that can actually be corroborated. So this is probably one of the earliest civilizations in the Western Hemisphere that could actually be corroborated by oral tradition. So there's a nation of natives called the Hautsuc Nation. They're an Aboriginal group. They have an oral tradition that's been told of a coastal strip of land here that never froze during the last ice age. So there you go. There's another piece of evidence. And we're going to move further south now. And now we're into the modern day United States, in the state of Washington, which is just going to be north of Seattle and just south of the Canadian border. They found a mastodon. This mastodon had a stone point that was embedded in its bone. That also indicates native civilizations being in the mainland United States area about 14,000 years ago. And we can even move further south here. And they found in Paisley Cave, which is in Paisley, Oregon, which is about where I'm circling right here. They found human remains. So in this Paisley Cave, we have yet another finding that can corroborate the existence of humans here in the Oregon area now. So let's go a little further south. And we're getting into more into the 14,000 years ago, sort of into 13,000 years ago at this point. So off the coast of California on Santa Rosa Island, this island's located 25 miles from Santa Barbara, they found a set of human remains. And this actually happened in 1959 when they found these remains. The finding was very significant because it also indicates the beginning of the use of watercraft, because these natives had to somehow get to this island 25 miles off the coast. So that indicates that they were using watercraft by this point. So we keep seeing this dating moving further and further out of the Ice Age. And now we get into further south even. They've made several findings all the way down through Mexico, and we can actually go all the way down into South America by this point. There's been similar findings to these human remains that we've been talking about. So now I'm going to get into about 11,000 years ago. And this is in Clovis, New Mexico, which is near the Texas-New Mexico border. They found something in the 1920s, and we're talking about stone tools in this case. And this was the famous Clovis site, and you may have heard of Clovis culture, which is a Native American culture that was dated from about 10 to 11,000 years ago. They found several of these type sites all over North America and South America. And so we're talking about a widespread culture, all with similar tools and stone points. And then about 10,000 years ago, there's another period that we're kind of going into now called the Archaic period. And there's evidence of this all over the Western Hemisphere. So this was actually a pre-agricultural period where smaller game were hunted. Also, you started seeing in parts of the West Coast, fishing was starting to emerge. And there was also began to be a respect for the dead and a possible belief in afterlife. And we know this because here in the Nevada area, we're talking about the Lahontan Basin, Nevada, which is north of Reno. They found mummified bodies, and these mummified bodies indicate a respect for the dead. Also in the western part of North America, they began to start finding evidence of a language. So about 7,000 years ago, or about 5,000 BC, we start seeing fishing emerging. I talked about fishing a minute ago, but it becomes more of a staple of the diet by this point. You start seeing salmon becoming the primary staple for natives in this area. And we go to the east here, all the way to Lake Superior. And where I'm pointing right now is a little island called Isle Royale. They found a site here that had copper mining, and they were using this copper mining to develop spear points. So this was really interesting because we start seeing more advanced type tools. And, you know, we've seen that if you go back to early civilizations over there in the Middle East, places like Phoenicia and places like that, they were doing something similar as well. So this is getting to be a little more of an advanced culture with this copper mining. And then we're heading down south to Kentucky. I'm going to circle the approximate area where Kentucky is. In the western part of Kentucky, a little town called Indian Knoll. They found both copper points and shells. And this is interesting because it indicates that there's been an extensive trade network between coastal areas, in either coastal areas here on the eastern seaboard or potentially coastal areas in the Gulf. These coastal areas must have been trading with these natives in Kentucky, and also we believe the natives up here in the Great Lakes area that are developing the copper are also doing trading. So we've got this extensive trade network here. And down here in modern day Monroe, Louisiana, they've started seeing evidence of mound building that actually happened around 3000 BC. Heading over here west in Cochise, Arizona, this would be about 3000 BC, they started seeing primitive forms of maize. So we're seeing some corn culture start to be developed as we're moving further and further away from the Ice Age and closer to modern times. So we're at about 3000 BC right here. So now we're going to head east again, and I'm pointing to the Savannah River. It's the Georgia-South Carolina border. They found evidence indicating that pottery was being developed about 2800 BC and was being developed extensively all the way into 1000 BC. So now we're getting into the 1000 BC area and closer to modern day. So between 1000 BC to about 1000 AD, we have this new period. We've moved out of the Archaic period and we're talking about the Formative period. They've also called it the Woodland period as well. So during this time, agriculture became widespread all over the continental United States. I'm, of course, talking about modern day continental United States and all over the Western Hemisphere as well. So at this point, we're getting into mound building. So mound building and Mississippian culture start getting developed all the way around this southeastern United States area. And also around the end of this period, I'm going to point to Newfoundland up here, because this is a very interesting event that happens. Huge moment between the Eastern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere. We're starting to see these cultures start making contact again, because the Inuit people of Newfoundland, they start making their first contact with the Viking explorer Leif Erikson and the Vikings. So this was a huge moment, because now we're starting to see the two hemispheres get back together again. And I'm going to talk about this a little more. I think that's actually going to be my next video, is talking about the Vikings. So that ought to be an interesting episode as well. So down here into Mexico, around 1000, we start seeing these Mayan and Aztec cultures. Of course, the Mayans were first, but here on the Yucatan, and then later the Aztecs start into power. We also see the Incas of South America. So all this sort of extends into the late 15th and early 16th century. So now we've come all the way up to the time where right here in the Bahamas, Columbus, in about the 15th century, heading into the 16th century, Columbus starts making contact with these natives here in the Bahamas. So with that, that's actually the original story of exploration and colonization of the Western Hemisphere, because this is where the European narrative of exploration and colonization begins. So I appreciate you going through this long narrative of the earliest American history with me. And I believe next week we're going to go into the story of the Vikings, and eventually that's going to head up into the story of Columbus, and we're going to try to hit that right around Columbus Day or a little bit before. So that's kind of the plans that we're looking at for the next couple of weeks or so. And then we're going to get into a few other things after that. So I appreciate you watching my channel. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for supporting. Please like and subscribe.